Good evening, everybody. So today I would like to talk about the ridiculously unfair standards that animal liberation advocates are held to, even by other vegans, and why I think that is ultimately rooted in speciesism. And no, I don't think that vegans are the victims. Hear me out. The perfect example of what I'm talking about is an Instagram reel I saw a few months ago. Anyway, with that cleared up, let's begin.
When you fail to account for white supremacy in veganism, you get white veganism.
Okay, so this person is known as Blair Imani. She is a social media influencer with over 400,000 followers on Instagram. She is not vegan. She eats animals. She wears their skin. Remember this for later because my critique of what she is doing here won't make sense until we've watched the entire video.
We must address the role of white supremacy and the oppression it creates, no matter if we are vegan or not.
You see, despite being uttered by the most obnoxious person in this video, this is probably the fairest sentence in this video. At the very least, he is not holding vegans to an unfairly higher standard than everyone else, simply for being vegan. If you don't know why I'm calling him obnoxious, stick around till the end of the video. But with that said, there's still something to be said here. He talks about veganism as a trivial thing. He says, quote, no matter if you're vegan or not, unquote. But what does it mean to not be vegan? To not be vegan means to actively support the oppression and killing of innocent non-human animals for temporary taste pleasure. To not be vegan means to actively participate in human supremacy. Flip this around, right? Would this person ever say, quote, we must be vegan and address the role of human supremacy and the oppression it creates, no matter if we are white supremacists or not, unquote? He probably won't ever say that, and for good reason. The only thing that I'm asking for here is that he extend the same moral consideration to other animals and not just his own species.
White veganism focuses solely on animal liberation while ignoring the context of colonization and imperialism and how all of this impacts all living beings and the planet.
Now, I have already made the case for why it is completely okay to focus solely on animal liberation in a previous video. If you haven't watched that video, I'll tell you about it at the end of this video. For this video, I would just like to focus on how vegans are being held to an unfairly higher standard. You see, most people know absolutely nothing about colonialism and imperialism, and hence they ignore it. In fact, most people probably won't be able to tell you the difference between imperialism and colonialism, and that's fine. They probably know things I do not know. Thing is, when non-vegans do this, everyone understands that it's fine. But when vegans do it, it's a terrible thing. But the only difference between a vegan doing it and a non-vegan doing it is that the vegan is not actively participating in the oppression and killing of innocent individuals on the basis of their species. Also, I would like to bring your attention to a related point. You see, what they're talking about here, white veganism, is not something that they have come up with for the first time. It's not them mentioning it for the first time. It's a term that is in circulation, right? It's a widely recognized term. Have you ever noticed that there is no term called white non-veganism, or white carnism, or white speciesism? Why do you think that is? Why is it that we have to place white in front of a practice of abstaining from contributing to oppression, but you don't place white in the practice of actively participating in that same oppression? Do you think this is fair? Oh, by the way, if you're enjoying this video, a sub to the channel and a like on this video would be fair.
Not all white people vegans are white vegans.
Our veganism must be intersectional, accessible, anti-racist, anti-imperialist, and decolonized.
Okay, I think what this person, Jessica in the kitchen, is saying is coming from a good place, but I still think that it's not entirely correct, for reasons explained in this video and primarily in previous videos. I'll talk about that in the end of the video, so stick around. Like, I don't think that you have to be fighting all of those fights simply because you've decided that you're going to withdraw your funding from the most evil industry on this planet. I don't think you have to be anti that or anti this. But what I will say, and I hope we agree there, is that when we talk about animal justice to people, we have to be non-racist, we have to be non-imperialist, and we should not communicate in a colonialist fashion, because obviously racism, colonialism, and imperialism are bad. And as far as I can tell, most vegans already agree with this. And in case it's not obvious, I will point out that there is a difference between being anti a certain oppression and simply not contributing to that oppression. Anti-racism is a good thing, right? To fight against racism is noble, but it's not a moral imperative. You don't have a moral obligation to give your time to fighting racism. Being non-racist is a neutral act. It is the moral baseline. It is the bare minimum. There is no excuse for being racist. And just as we had to be non-racist, non-colonialist, non-imperialist when talking about animal justice, similarly, when talking about racial justice, we have to be non-speciesist. Not necessarily anti-speciesist, simply not speciesist. I don't think you have to fight speciesism simply because you're fighting racism. But at the very least, you should not be contributing to speciesism and animal exploitation. And that is sort of my complaint with this video. While it asks vegans to be anti-this and anti-that, while it asks vegans to actively oppose certain kinds of oppression, it is completely fine with someone who not only doesn't actively oppose speciesism, but actively participates in speciesism. I'm of course talking about Blair Imani. Blair Imani not only wears the skin of other animals, as you can see here, she even promotes wearing the skin of other animals. She eats animals, feels entitled to their life and liberty, and then tells others that they shouldn't feel entitled to tell her that she is taking their life and liberty away. This, by the way, is a conversation a friend of mine had with Blair Imani. Now, I don't think that Blair Imani is doing something terribly, uniquely immoral, as 99% of the world is non-vegan and does the same kinds of things. But if she is going to tell vegans what they have to do to be have a complete form of veganism and a just form of veganism, at the very least, she ought not to be participating in the oppression of innocent animals. Another thing that I would like to bring to your notice about what happens when we do this "we have to be against all oppressions" thing in the context of animal rights is that animal rights and animal liberation comes last. Consider this post from Blair Imani. She says that we have to be fighting against all forms of oppression. Do you see animal exploitation or speciesism being mentioned anywhere there? Now, as a response to that, you might be saying, "Oh, come on, Aditya, she cannot be listing all the forms of oppression. That will take forever." But that's exactly my point. Every individual cannot be fighting against every form of oppression there is with the limited time that we have on our hands. Instead, we should all be doing what we are good at to make the world a better place without being expected to do everything.
And I think, and I've said this before, I think the world works best if we all do what we are good at, so that no group of people should ever be discouraged from doing what they are good at. The world works best if we all get our opportunities and we all do it.
And another point about this limited time that we have on our hands. Given the extent of speciesism, given the extent of animal exploitation, at 3 billion sentient individuals being killed per day, don't you think that given that humongous number, that it makes sense to ask that when we're listing all the forms of oppression, that this is the one that definitely has to be mentioned. But it doesn't end here, you see. Blair Imani also added a screenshot of a tweet where she says that climate change is related to racism and colonization. Fair enough. But far more than that, climate change is related to animal exploitation. As we now know from numerous peer-reviewed scientific studies, animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of climate change. Now, as you can probably guess, I think that we should all be vegan regardless of whether or not animal agriculture contributes to climate change, that the moral worth of individual non-human animals is a sufficient reason to not torture and kill them for our temporary pleasure. But it is just an undeniable fact, it is an undeniable scientific fact that animal agriculture is indeed one of the leading causes of climate change. Yet it doesn't even get mentioned. But racism and colonization, which are far less related to climate change, definitely do get a mention. If this doesn't convince you that this method of being against all oppressions will always put animal rights last, I don't know what will convince you. And before I end this video, if you want to learn more about the obnoxious nature of queer brown vegan and how he talks condescendingly to those far less privileged than him, watch this video. This is the video YouTube thinks you'll like the best. Click here to support my channel and receive exclusive benefits in return. Be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.